Welcome to Through a Glass Darkly Radio. You're listening to us on United Public Radio. The intro song was Mark of the Doomslayer by Carl Casey at White Bat Audio. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Happy Saturday. Happy weekend. Good to see everyone. Fred62, ladies and gentlemen. This is the main event of the evening. Bear effer. Yes, ma'am. Yes, indeedy. So, all right. This is going to be a little bit more. My hair's all messed up. This is going to be a little bit more science-y. A little bit of quantum mechanics. A little bit of spooky action at a distance. So it's going to be a little more technical than normal. But it verges on kind of trying to understand the fundamental nature of reality. So we're going to get into that. A few things, like I always say, if you are not subscribed, please subscribe. And I thank you very much for being a subscriber. YouTube, I was growing very rapidly. And then all of a sudden my growth in terms of subscribers has, in the last 2 days, if I continue at that rate, I will not reach my 20,000 objective. Now, granted, Fridays and Saturdays Fridays are typically pretty bad. Jalal, yes. Saturday is my cheat day, so I can have things with sugar on Saturday. I can't have any carbohydrates the rest of the week, but on Saturdays I can. So, yeah, thank you, Daisy U812, who says learning more is everything. Thank you. So yes, I have my Dunkin' coffee, which is also my third coffee of the day, in addition to multiple Diet Cokes and whatnot. So I am fully amped for this discussion. But anyway, again, subscribers, if you think you're subscribed, please go and check, because YouTube loves to unsubscribe people. So I was on a tear. I was well within kind of 20,000 subscribers was in sight. But if the last 2 days, I mean, today's not over yet, but I basically need to add a minimum. Well, first I have to get to 1,900. And then the last 2 months, I have to add probably a minimum of 15 a day, which I don't even know if that's right. Yeah, well, maybe it's still, but if I only get like 10 a day, it ain't happening. It ain't going to happen. So if I have like 33 a day, I'll hit it sooner than I need to. But yeah, it slowed down, terribly. And then today's one of those days where it would go up 3 subscribers and then down 5. Like, it's still up positive, but very annoying. Let's see. Hey, Scott Ian, good to see you. All right, so that's the first item. The second item is, as I say this all the time, I use AI to generate the scripts for these things. I review the scripts. Sometimes I don't like them. Sometimes I put it back. But this is the only time I use AI for scripting. Everything else, organic. So just a heads up. If people want to bounce after learning that, I totally understand. But I have to do it because I work 100 hours a week with a full-time job and a number of other things that I do, including this channel. And I literally don't have time. So that's kind of where I am with that. Anyway, with that, let's get started with today's festivities. Let me just mark where we left off and get started. Quantum mirrors and dimensional portals. Experiments with consciousness-based reality engineering. So this podcast is going to explore the convergence of quantum mechanics, consciousness studies, and theories of dimensional portals, examining how each domain informs the speculative notion of consciousness-based reality engineering. That sounds like a mouthful, doesn't it? We review established scientific frameworks, including quantum measurement and entanglement, models of consciousness in physics, and theoretical physics concepts of extra dimensions and wormholes, alongside historical and contemporary experiments. Real world studies such as double slit interference experiments and random number generator trials that probe potential influences of observers' mind on quantum systems are discussed. We also examine speculative extensions, quantum mirrors as metaphorical devices bridging quantum and classical realities, and dimensional portals, wormholes, or alternate universe gateways as they appear in theoretical physics and fringe experiments. Throughout, we highlight the interplay between genuine scientific findings and speculative interpretations. Notable researchers, institutions, and even military or intelligence programs, such as remote viewing and psychical research, are reviewed for their contributions to this interdisciplinary tapestry. The analysis finds intriguing parallels between quantum observation effects and consciousness, but also emphasizes the lack of empirical evidence for exotic claims. We conclude with a discussion on how these fields might converge in the future and the methodological changes in rigorously exploring consciousness-related influences on physical reality. Now, modern physics and consciousness research are intersecting in unprecedented ways, giving rise to bold speculations about engineering reality with the mind. Quantum mechanics, with its observer-dependent phenomena, has long invited interpretations that place the observer, possibly conscious, at the center of reality formation. Simultaneously, consciousness studies and noetic sciences have probed whether the mind can affect matter at quantum scales. Adding a further twist, theoretical physics posits the existence of hidden dimensions and wormholes, essentially dimensional portals, that could connect distant realms of the multiverse. This podcast examines how these three domains, quantum mechanics, consciousness, and dimensional portal theories, converge on the concept of consciousness-based reality engineering. We begin by reviewing key concepts. The quantum measurement problem. Does observation collapse the wave function? The role of consciousness as posited by various interpretations, from Wigner's hypothesis to modern quantum mind theories, and the notion of extra dimensions or parallel universes, from Einstein-Rosen bridges to string theory's higher dimensions. We then delve into historical and contemporary experiments that blur boundaries between mind and matter. For example, mind-influenced random number generator experiments and observations of quantum interference patterns under conscious attention. In parallel, we look at speculative projects that treat mirrors and portals as literal or metaphorical gateways. For instance, using optical mirrors in quantum experiments or exploring mirror matter that might hint at parallel worlds. Furthermore, the paper highlights contributions from notable figures and institutions. Pioneering physicists like Eugene Wigner and John von Neumann entertain the idea that the consciousness of an observer plays a unique role in quantum state reduction. Visionary thinkers such as Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff developed quantum theories of mind, for instance, OR, that attempt to bridge neural processes with quantum events. On the experimental side, organizations like the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Lab, or PAIR, and the Institute of Noetic Sciences, or IONS, conducted decades of experiments on mind-matter interactions at microphysical scales. Even governmental agencies have shown interest. The U.S. military and intelligence community ran the Stargate program on remote viewing, or, as you all know, psychic perception, and explored whether human consciousness could transcend space-time constraints, touching on themes of alternate realms, albeit without conclusive results. Ultimately, this podcast adapts a more academic tone, distinguishing established scientific evidence from speculation. It'll cite peer-reviewed sources where available for experimental findings, as well as reputable cross-disciplinary journals for speculative ideas. By structuring the discussion into theoretical frameworks, experimental evidence, and speculative extensions, the podcast will aim to provide a comprehensive overview of quantum mirrors and dimensional portals as they relate to consciousness-driven reality engineering. The goal is not to validate fantastical claims, but to critically explore where science ends and speculation begins, and how further research might push this boundary. Let's start with quantum mechanics and the observer. Quantum mechanics famously upended classical notions of an objective, observer-independent reality. In the early 20th century, experiments like the double slit experiment revealed that light and electrons can behave as waves or particles depending on observation. When not measured, a single electron fired at a double slit produces an interference pattern, as if it went through both slits as a wave. However, if one observes or detects which slit the electron goes through, the interference pattern collapses into particle-like behavior. This quantum measurement problem, what causes the collapse of the wave function, remains foundational in quantum theory. The Copenhagen interpretation, which is Niels Bohr and Werner Heisenberg, traditionally held that the act of measurement or interaction with a measuring device caused collapse without requiring a conscious observer. Yet some physicists hypothesized a special role for consciousness. Eugene Wigner in the 1960s proposed that conscious observation causes the wave function to collapse. In his view, a conscious mind was the ultimate measurer that converts quantum possibilities into a single realized outcome. This interpretation was supported by John von Neumann's earlier analysis that the chain of quantum interactions from particle to detector to brain must terminate in an observer's mind. Such ideas introduce the tantalizing notion that mind and quantum matter are entwined at a fundamental level. Not all agreed. Other physicists offered starkly different takes. Hugh Everett's many worlds interpretation of 1957 sidestepped collapse altogether. Every quantum possibility actualizes, branching into parallel realities. Thus, the observer's mind also splits, experiencing one branch. In this model, consciousness doesn't collapse the wave function. Instead, it coexists with myriad outcomes in a multiverse of branching worlds, effectively a literal form of dimensional portal concept, though one cannot communicate between branches. Meanwhile, critics of quantum consciousness ideas, such as Victor Stenger, argued that invoking consciousness is unnecessary mysticism. Stenger famously labeled quantum consciousness hypotheses a myth with no scientific basis, comparing them to gods, unicorns, and dragons. Between these poles, the debate over the observer's role set the stage for experimental tests. If consciousness does affect quantum events, one might detect slight deviations in outcomes when human observers intend a particular result. In the late 20th century, researchers began testing this with random number generators and optical systems, which we'll discuss later. But mainstream physics largely treats observations as any interaction with the environment. Hold on for a second. I'm sorry. I can't. Hold on. Just give me a moment. All right. Sorry about that. Okay. So between these two poles, the debate over the observer's role set the stage for experimental tests. If consciousness does affect quantum events, one might detect slight deviations in outcomes when human observers intend a particular result. In the late 20th century, researchers began testing this with random number generators and optical systems. Again, I said we're going to discuss later. But mainstream physics largely treats observation as any interaction with the environment, whether a human is watching or not. Wheeler's delayed choice experiment and others demonstrated that even decisions made after a photon passes a slit can seemingly affect its past behavior, reinforcing that the quantum world defies classical intuition. John Wheeler spoke of the universe as a participatory universe, implying in some metaphorical sense that observers shape reality, though Wheeler meant measurement in a broad sense, not exclusively human consciousness. All right, so consciousness and reality, noetic sciences and beyond. Alongside quantum physics, a scientific and pseudoscientific exploration of consciousness and psi, or psychic phenomena, was unfolding. Consciousness based reality engineering refers to the idea that by mental intention or awareness, one can directly influence physical reality. This idea has ancient roots in mysticism, but in the modern era, it's been probed experimentally under controlled conditions. Parapsychology labs in the mid 20th century, such as J.B. Rhine's lab at Duke University, tested phenomena like telepathy and psychokinesis, which is basically mind influencing matter. While much of parapsychology remains controversial, it provided a proto scientific framework for testing mind matter interaction. In the 1970s and 80s, the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research PAIR program, led by Robert Jahn, Robert John conducted extensive experiments where human operators tried to bias the output of random event generators. Over millions of trials, PAIR reported tiny statistical deviations from trance that correlated with operators' intentions. For example, a person intending to produce more ones than zeros in a binary random sequence might achieve 50.2% ones instead of the expected 50.0%. While the effect was small, PAIR researchers argued that over huge data sets it was significant, hinting that consciousness might influence random quantum processes. These results were published in scholarly venues, though often in parapsychology or engineering journals rather than mainstream physics journals, fueling debate. Critics contended that any deviation was due to uncontrolled biases or statistical flukes. Nonetheless, PAIR's legacy inspired further mind over matter research. Another key institution is the Institute of Noetic Sciences, or IONS, founded in 1973 by Apollo 14 astronaut Edgar Mitchell. Mitchell had a profound experience in space, leading him to believe in cosmic consciousness. IONS has supported research into meditation, consciousness, and physics, and even sponsored experiments on whether focused human attention can affect quantum systems. In one series of experiments circa 2012 to 2015, double-slit optical apparatus were used with human participants attempting to mentally influence the interference pattern. The hypothesis was that if consciousness collapses the wave function, an individual focusing attention on the which path, which slit a photon goes through, might reduce the interference pattern, as if a measurement occurred. Dean Radin and colleagues reported modest but consistent reductions in interference fringes during focused mental attention in several such trials, suggesting an observer effect linked to consciousness. These findings, while intriguing, were met with skepticism and calls for more rigorous replication. To date, no consensus has been reached. Conventional physicists would attribute any such effect to subtle, ordinary disturbances or statistical anomalies, not a direct interaction of mind with photons. The observer effect in quantum mechanics often gets misunderstood in popular discourse, as a conscious observer is required. In truth, experiments like those above seek to clarify if a conscious observer has any special role beyond that of a measuring device. The mainstream view is that decoherence, interactions with the environment, accounts for why quantum superpositions appear to collapse without invoking consciousness. Nonetheless, the philosophical question, does the universe require an observer to exist, remains a subject of debate in foundations of physics. Freeman Dyson once provocatively mused that mind might be inherent even in elementary particles, saying, mind as manifested by the capacity to make choices is to some extent inherent in every electron. Such statements, while not a scientific assertion, show that even renowned physicists entertained holistic ideas that blur the line between matter and mind. From the perspective of cognitive science and neuroscience, most researchers do not expect quantum effects in the brain to be large enough to influence consciousness. Brain processes are warm and wet, which usually destroys quantum coherence. Yet there are notable exceptions. Roger Penrose, a theoretical physicist, and Stuart Hameroff, an anesthesiologist, proposed the orchestrated objective reduction, or ORC-OR model. They speculate that quantum computations in neural microtubules contribute to consciousness, and that quantum states in the brain spontaneously collapse by Penrose's gravity-related mechanism, conscious moments occur. This is a form of quantum consciousness theory that attempts to be scientific. Penrose and Hameroff pointed to findings such as quantum level vibrations detected in microtubule structures of neurons as supportive evidence. However, the ideas remain unproven and controversial. Critics like physicist Lawrence Krauss noted that Penrose's conjectures gave New Age crackpots ammunition, since the brain is not an isolated quantum mechanical system, and quantum effects would likely be dampened by the warm neuronal environment. In essence, the mainstream stance is that while quantum processes exist in biology, quantum biology, for instance, is an emerging field, scaling them up to explain consciousness or mind-matter interaction is speculative at best. All right, now let's move to dimensional portals and parallel realities. The third pillar of our topic involves dimensional portals, a broad term we use to include wormholes, extra dimensions, and other pathways to alternative realities. Unlike consciousness or quantum mechanics, which have experimental components, the idea of portals to other dimensions has largely been theoretical or fictional. Nonetheless, it is grounded in serious physics concepts. We start with general relativity in 1915. That general relativity introduced the possibility of wormholes. In 1935, Albert Einstein and Nathan Rosen discovered the Einstein-Rosen bridge solution, a tunnel-like geometry in spacetime connecting two separate locations, often visualized as two black holes connected. The term wormhole was later coined by John Wheeler. A wormhole is essentially a shortcut through the fabric of spacetime, a literal portal through dimensions. Though mathematically allowed, wormholes might require exotic matter with negative energy to stabilize. Physicists like Kip Thorne have theorized about traversable wormholes and even their use for time travel by accelerating one end near light speed. If traversable wormholes exist, they could connect not only distant points in our universe, but conceivably different universes or different timelines. This raises the sci-fi-like scenario of stepping into another universe's reality, effectively a dimensional portal. No experimental evidence for natural or artificial macroscopic wormholes exists so far. However, the analysis of wormholes continues in theoretical physics, especially in the context of quantum gravity. Then there are extra dimensions and the multiverse. Beyond the three spatial dimensions we experience, physics has entertained additional spatial dimensions. The Kaluza-Klein theory in the 1920s showed that adding a fourth spatial dimension could unify gravity and electromagnetism. String theory in the late 20th century requires 10 or 11 dimensions for mathematical consistency, with our observed 3D space possibly being a brane floating in a higher dimensional space. Brane, and that's B-R-A-N-E, as in like a membrane. Some string theorists, for instance, Lisa Randall and Raman Sundram, suggest that other 3D branes could be parallel universes separated from us in a higher dimension. Analogously, two sheets of paper, branes, parallel to each other in a 3D volume. Movement between these branes, a brain portal, is speculative, but scenarios have been considered where gravity or other forces might leak between brain worlds. These theories, while theoretical, gained attention because they might explain certain phenomena like the weakness of gravity and could be testable via high-energy experiments. Indeed, there were experiments and analyses at the Large Hadron Collider looking for evidence of extra dimensions, such as missing energy that could indicate particles escaping into other dimensions. Though nothing conclusive has been found, the possibility of microportals at quantum scales remains a tantalizing notion in high energy physics. Then there is the ER equals EPR conjecture. A striking 21st century idea connecting quantum entanglement with wormholes is the ER equals EPR conjecture. Proposed by physicists Juan Maldacena and Leonard Susskind in 2013, it posits that every Einstein wormhole, is equivalent to an Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen entangled pair. In simpler terms, if two particles are maximally entangled, one can think of them as connected by a tiny non-traversable wormhole. This conjecture, though not proven, offers a conceptual bridge between quantum mechanics and space-time geometry. It suggests that quantum entanglement itself might be a sort of thread linking distant points, not useful for sending information, but a deep structural connection. The quantum foam picture of spacetime at the Planck scale already implied spacetime might be topologically rich, with tiny wormholes forming and annihilating constantly. Maldacena and Susskind's idea takes it further, implying that perhaps spacetime connectivity, that is, wormholes, and quantum connectivity, that is, entanglement, are two faces of the same coin. If true, one might envision leveraging entanglement as a resource to induce macro-scale wormholes, though presently that's pure speculation. It does, however, give theoretical heft to the imagery of quantum portals. Entanglement could be considered a kind of portal in the information sense, since it links the fates of particles across space instantly, but again, without classical information transfer. Then there are mirror universes. In a different vein, physicists have speculated about mirror matter, an entire set of particles that are mirror images of the known particles, potentially composing a parallel hidden sector of the universe. This idea can stem from restoring symmetry violations, like parity symmetry, by postulating a mirror version of every particle. If a mirror universe exists, it would interact with our universe only weakly, perhaps via gravity. Some experimental hints, like anomalous neutron decay results, led to proposals that neurons might oscillate into mirror neurons, effectively disappearing from our world temporarily, from our observed world temporarily. In 2019, a scientist at Oak Ridge National Laboratory, Lee Burchard, garnered media attention by attempting an experiment to detect mirror particles, somewhat sensationalized as trying to open a portal to a parallel universe. The experiment involves sending neurons at a barrier to see if some vanish and then reappear, which could indicate transition to a mirror realm and back. While the results did not yield evidence of a mirror world, such attempts illustrate the scientific interest in portals at the particle level. The concept of dimensional portals also thrives in the cultural imagination. Science fiction often depicts devices like quantum mirrors or stargates that allow travel to alternate dimensions. For instance, the science fiction TV series Stargate SG-1 featured an ancient device creating a wormhole between distant planets. Another example is the quantum mirror in the same franchise, a fictional artifact that allowed characters to step into parallel universes. While fiction, these ideas sometimes draw on the real physics discussed above, wormholes, many worlds, etc., and inspire public interest in whether such portals could exist. Notably, some individuals in the paranormal community have even attempted to use mirrors in dark rooms, so-called psychomantium techniques, to induce altered states or interdimensional experiences, a modern twist on scrying that is outside science, but culturally relevant to conscious-based reality engineering. In summary, the background shows quantum mechanics provides phenomena, superposition, entanglement, that challenge our notion of reality and invite the question of the observer's role. Consciousness research, though not mainstream in physics, pushes the idea that the mind might influence matter and even access information across space-time. Theoretical physics of dimensions and wormholes, while not about consciousness per se, opens the door to parallel realities and shortcuts through space and time. The stage is set to examine how these threads come together in experiments and what results have been observed when we try to use consciousness as a tool to affect or access quantum and higher dimensional phenomena. All right, so we're going to move on to theoretical frameworks for consciousness quantum interactions. To analyze experiments and claims at this intersection, it is useful to outline several theoretical or interpretive frameworks that researchers have used or proposed. These frameworks guide what one might expect and how experiments are designed. Let's start with the von Neumann-Wigner interpretation, which basically states that consciousness causes collapse of the wave function. In this framework, the quantum wave function collapse occurs only when observed by a conscious agent. The universe is described as remaining in a superposition state up the chain of interactions until a mind intervenes. While not a dominant view among physicists today, it underpins the rationale of certain experiments, so for instance those of ions, which test if human observation yields different outcomes than automated detection. If true, even a passive viewing or attention by a person could reduce quantum interference. A concrete mental model here is the Schrödinger's cat paradox. This interpretation would say the cat's fate isn't sealed until a conscious observer opens the box. Wigner's friend thought experiment further yields this. A friend inside the lab might see a collapse, but from an outsider's view, the lab is still in superposition until observed. These paradoxes highlight contradictions that arise if consciousness is fundamental in quantum mechanics, motivating either rejection of the idea or radical revisions of how we think about mind and physics. Then there's the quantum mind hypothesis or microphysical consciousness. These hypotheses, like Penrose and Hamerau's ORC-OR or Henry Stapp's ideas, propose that consciousness itself is a quantum process. Thus, rather than consciousness causing collapse, or other quantum non-computability causes consciousness. Penrose's ORC-OR suggests each conscious moment arises from the gravitational collapse of a quantum state in brain microtubules. Stapp, on the other hand, following von Neumann, argued that mental effort could bias quantum outcomes via a quantum Zeno effect. Essentially, a focused mind holding a superposition in a certain state by continual attentive observation. In his view, mind selects a particular outcome to actualize among quantum possibilities. These frameworks differ in mechanism but share a core idea. Quantum phenomena are integral to consciousness. If correct, one might expect that human intention, a product of those quantum brain processes, could resonate with external quantum systems. This is highly speculative, but it gives a theoretical narrative for why an experimenter's mind might couple to, say, a photon in an interferometer, perhaps via some quantum entanglement between observer and observed, although standard quantum theory disallows signaling via entanglement. Then there's the noetic science and field consciousness. Some parapsychological frameworks treat consciousness as a non-local field that can interact with physical systems. For example, biologist Rupert Sheldrake proposed morphic resonance fields that carry information and could link minds and matter. While not quantum in a strict sense, such ideas sometimes borrow quantum vocabulary to justify non-local effects. Another concept is the Global Consciousness Project, the GCP, led by Roger Nelson, formerly of PAIR. The GCP treats collective human consciousness as potentially affecting random number generators around the world. Their framework doesn't specify a mechanism, quantum or otherwise, but they observe correlations between major global events, for instance, mass meditations or emotional reactions to tragic events, and tiny fluctuations in distributed RNG outputs. The implied framework is a kind of consciousness field or interconnection that can influence entropy production in devices. Although mainstream science finds it hard to accept such claims without a mechanism, the data have been published for examination. These notions extend the idea of consciousness beyond individual brains, positing some level of coherent structure that might overlap with physical systems on a global scale. Then there's the many worlds and many minds theory. In Everett's many worlds interpretation, every observation's outcome is realized in some branch of the multiverse. Consciousness just happens to experience one branch. An extension called the many minds interpretation proposed by H. Dieter Zay and others suggests that each branching of the quantum state corresponds to a branching of the observer's mind into multiple non-interacting minds, each inhabiting one branch. While this doesn't allow engineering reality, since you can't choose which branch you feel yourself in, it presents a picture where all possible realities exist. Some speculative thinkers have wondered if consciousness could traverse branches or if quantum computation could harness many worlds. David Deutsch, a quantum computing pioneer, has described a quantum computer as effectively performing calculations by borrowing resources from parallel universes, a vivid image, though not a testable statement. Within this framework, a quantum portal might simply be a controlled quantum branching. However, by construction, different branches cannot communicate, which secures the consistency of many worlds. Therefore, many worlds itself doesn't support conscious influence over outcomes except insofar as one can increase the amplitude or probability measure of desired outcomes by conventional means, for instance, using quantum interference in computations. Many minds remains a philosophical interpretation, but it's worth noting in context. It removes special status from consciousness, treating it as just another physical process that splits, the polar opposite of Wigner's view. Then there's wormhole entanglement, the ER equals EPR framework. Though still being developed, one could imagine a framework where if entanglement and wormholes are equivalent, then perhaps certain mental states, if they correspond to quantum states, could be entangled with remote systems, effectively creating a wormhole-like connection. This is highly conjectural, and no serious scientific model exists for human brains creating wormholes. But to illustrate, if one took ER equals EPR at face value, an entangled pair of particles is connected by a tiny wormhole. If a conscious observer could somehow become entangled with a particle, and again, in standard quantum theory, observers do become entangled with measured systems, but in a way that precludes influence beyond standard probabilities, then maybe one could argue that the observer is connected via a wormhole of sorts. Some have poetically suggested that consciousness might explore wormhole-like non-locality. For instance, microtubule Orco-WAR supporters occasionally use phrases like quantum channels in space-time geometry. It should be stressed this is speculative poetry more than framework. Still, in the far reaches of theoretical physics, scientists like Jack Sarfati have speculated on conscious mental processes being related to traversable wormholes at the Planck scale, albeit these ideas are not mainstream or empirically supported yet. Then there's altered states in hyperspace. A psychological framework relevant here involves altered states of consciousness through meditation, psychedelic, sensory deprivation, etc., in which individuals report experiences of otherworldly realms or unity with the universe. Some theorists, like Stanislav Grof, have posited that non-ordinary states consciousness might access information not bounded by space-time. While not framed in quantum terms explicitly, a few researchers have drawn parallels between the unpredictable, non-local nature of quantum phenomena and the subjective reports from transpersonal psychology. If one were to hypothesize a mechanism, one could say perhaps the brain in altered states might be less classically decoherent and more able to tap into quantum informational processes. Again, this is conjectural and not experimentally verified, but it's part of the tapestry of ideas feeding into consciousness-based reality engineering. The notion that by changing our mental state, we might access other dimensions of reality. Thus, some experiments in this realm have been exploratory and phenomenological. For instance, subjects under the influence of DMT, which is a psychedelic, often report encountering entities or environments that they believe are real and external, prompting speculation by researchers like Dr. Rick Strassman that perhaps they are turning into parallel universes. This extends the idea of a portal to a consciousness-facilitated one. The mind itself is a projector into other realms. Science has not validated any such claim, typically explaining these as internal hallucinations. However, this perspective is mentioned to cover the breadth of what falls under consciousness-based reality engineering, not just influencing physical instruments, but possibly using consciousness as a vehicle to explain other layers of reality. Excuse me. In summary, multiple frameworks exist, ranging from orthodox physics interpretations to fringe speculative theories. These guide the design and interpretation of experiments. A researcher convinced by the von Neumann-Wigner idea will look for evidence of collapse differences with versus without a conscious observer. A parapsychologist with a field consciousness model will gather statistical evidence of mind-matter correlation. A theoretical physicist might examine if entangled states could allow any form of information tunneling. So far, quantum theory says no usable information could be sent via entanglement alone. Each framework comes with its assumptions and expected signatures. We now turn to the experiments and evidence to see what has been found or claimed in practice. All right, so we're going to talk about analysis of experiments and evidence. So the quantum observation experiments. Does mind affect matter? We'll start with a double slit experiment with observers. The classic double slit experiment has been at the center of testing consciousness effects. Baseline quantum physics shows that any witch path detector at a slit, even an inanimate device, will destroy interference. So first, experiments have verified that it is not required for a human to observe in order for collapse to happen. A Geiger counter or photodetector registering a photon at one slit will collapse the photon's wave function just fine. This supports the Copenhagen view that the interaction equals measurement. However, the question remains, if no physical detector is present, but a human observer intends to observe, say, by watching the output or even psychically measuring it, is there any effect? Starting in the 1970s and with more sophisticated setups in recent years, researchers have attempted human-in-the-loop double-slit tests. One approach uses an optical double-slit apparatus with an interference pattern recorded by a camera. Participants, often meditators, were instructed at random intervals either to relax or to concentrate on the double-slit device, with the intention of seeing which slit the photon goes through. During concentration periods, the prediction per consciousness collapse theory was that interference visibility would decrease as if an observation was made. Indeed, some experiments reported a small but significant reduction in interference fringe contrast during focused intention periods. For example, in one study published by Dean Radin and collaborators across 50 sessions, or approximately 50 sessions, the spectral signature of the interference pattern changed in the direction consistent with wave function collapse when participants focused their mental attention. These results, if taken at face value, suggest the mind can emulate a measurement device's effect on a quantum system. However, interpreting such experiments is tricky. The effect sizes are usually just a few parts in 1,000 change in fringe visibility, which is near the noise level of mechanical or thermal fluctuations. Meticulous control is needed to ensure, for instance, that the participant isn't unconsciously causing vibrations, even slight body movements or temperature changes that could alter the interferometer alignment. While such experimenters took measures to isolate the apparatus, critics point out that observing with the mind is hard to separate from subtle physiological outputs of the observer. To date, these experiments are not widely reproduced by independent mainstream labs. They appear primarily in frontier journals. Thus, evidence for a genuine consciousness-specific effect on the double-slit outcome is suggestive, but far from confirmed. It remains an open, fascinating, experimental question that future, more refined setups might address. For example, conducting the test with observers located remotely to eliminate any local influence, or using physiological monitoring to subtract out the effect of any bodily reactions. Then there are the random number generator experiments. A major body of research in consciousness matter interaction uses electronic random generators, often based on quantum processes like electronic noise or radioactive decay. The Pear Labs' decades-long experiment is emblematic. In a typical trial, an RNG producing, say, 200 bits per second is logged for a baseline period. Then a human operator concentrates on producing more ones than zeros for a period, then perhaps tries for more zeros in another period, etc. Over many trials, one can see if the distribution of bits shifted from 50-50. Pear reported that while each individual's results were usually near chance, collectively, over millions of bits, there was a tiny bias in the direction of intention on the order of 0.1% deviation. This was statistically significant given the huge sample size, with odds against chance quoted as astronomical. Importantly, the effect did not grow with time. For instance, one couldn't accumulate a large deviation by prolonged effort. It stayed at a tiny deviation. This applies if we are real. It's a weak influence of consciousness on random quantum events. Skeptics have scrutinized the experiments for potential flaws, improper randomization, human selective reporting, or unnoticed external influences. Over the years, methodologies improved. So, for instance, using truly unpredictable quantum sources and automating protocols to eliminate human fudging, etc. Meta-analyses of many such RNG studies, including those at Pear and elsewhere, have shown a very small but consistent effect in the data with overall statistical significance. Yet, because no theory in conventional physics predicts this, the results remain controversial. From a scientific rigor standpoint, the reproducibility of these experiments by independent teams is crucial. Some labs did repeat RNG experiments and found similar tiny effects. Others found nothing. The field remains divided. One notable extension is the Global Consciousness Project, or the GCP. Here, instead of one person trying to influence one RNG, dozens of RNGs around the world run continuously, and researchers look for correlations with global events hypothesized to engage millions of minds. So, for instance, New Year's celebrations, terrorist attacks, mass meditations. Surprisingly, some analyses have found that during such events, the RNG outputs show slightly reduced randomness, correlation across devices, or shifts in distribution beyond chance. For instance, during the September 11th, 2001 attacks, the GCP network allegedly showed significant departures from randomness. If one doesn't accept the paranormal explanation, one might question if power grid disturbances or other mundane factors could coincide with such events. But GCP claims the effect starts a few hours before major events, which invites even more speculative interpretations like precognition or interconnected consciousness. Once again, these results are far from accepted by mainstream science, but they form a body of empirical data that proponents argue is consistent with a consciousness field affecting random systems. Then there's psychokinesis and macro phenomena. The above experiments deal with micro effects, single photons, electrons, bits. Classical psychokinesis, PK, refers to mind-moving matter at human scales. Think spoon bending or affecting dice throws. There's a long history of such claims, but in control settings, evidence for macro PK is scant and often fraud-tainted. One interesting bridge from micro to macro is the quantum Zeno effect, or QZE. In quantum physics, frequent observation of an unstable particle can freeze its decay. In other words, the act of measurement resets the system's evolution. Henry Stapp and others speculated that if the mind can act like an observer, an act of sustained attention could, say, stabilize a quantum state in the brain. This was part of his model for mind's causal efficacy. Extending that, one might imagine using QZE externally. If a person could psychically observe a quantum process rapidly, they might slow down a chemical reaction or a nuclear decay. Experiments in this direction are hard to perform and have yet yielded any clear positive results, but they illustrate how quantum concepts provide hypothetical mechanisms for PK. At present, there's no reliable, repeatable demonstration of a person mentally influencing a non-quantum physical object, like moving a compass needle without touch, under rigorous observation. So reality engineering in the macroscopic sense remains unsubstantiated. Then there's remote viewing and non-local perception. They're not about influencing matter. It's worth noting experiments in consciousness accessing information beyond the ordinary senses, often discussed in the same breath as quantum consciousness via ideas of quantum non-locality. Remote viewing testing in the Stargate project funded by U.S. intelligence agencies in the Cold War era involved individuals attempting to describe distant locations or objects using mental perception alone. Some successes were reported anecdotally, but overall results were inconsistent when rigorously evaluated. How this ties in here is through attempts to find a theoretical underpinning. Some have speculated that quantum entanglement or zero-point fields might carry information, enabling perception independent of distance. There is no accepted quantum model for such psychic phenomena. A quantum entanglement cannot be used to send usable signals. It's constrained by locality when it comes to information transfer. Nevertheless, occasional cross-disciplinary papers discuss whether the brain could be sensitive to quantum level signals or if consciousness could be a global quantum phenomenon entangled with the environment, hence knowing distant events. These ideas remain at the fringe. The Stargate program was eventually terminated with a review in 1995, concluding remote viewing had not been useful in intelligence operations. Despite some intriguing hits, the overall reliability was too low. Yet, interestingly, some physicists like Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ, who led the SRI remote viewing research, adopted quantum language. For instance, viewing the mind as a non-local quantum object to rationalize how remote viewing might work. This again shows the allure of quantum theory in explaining the inexplicable, even if the connections are more metaphorical than literal. Now let's talk about dimensional portal experiments, testing the edges of reality. So on the more physical side of portals, a few experiments explicitly search for gateways to other dimensions or parallel realities. So we'll first start with the neutron oscillation tests. One example already mentioned is the Oak Ridge experiment, looking for neutrons transitioning to mirror neutrons. The setup involved creating a beam of ultra-cold neurons and seeing if any, disappear and then reappear after a delay, with the idea that they might oscillate to a mirror dimension where they don't interact, then oscillate back. The result was null. No evidence of the oscillation was found within experimental sensitivity. However, the null result also put new limits on theories of mirror matter. Particle physicists have also tested for other exotic pathways. For instance, whether a neutron might transition into a hypothetical sterile neutron that could travel through extra dimensions, a concept tied to certain brain world scenarios. These tests so far uphold standard physics. Particles appear to stay in our realm, but the fact that serious scientists conduct such experiments shows that the notion of a portal is taken literally in certain theoretical frameworks, particularly those aiming to solve puzzles like the neutron lifetime discrepancy or dark matter composition. Then there's microscopic black hole production. At the Large Hadron Collider, there was speculation, often overhyped in media, that high-energy proton collisions might produce tiny black holes or gateways to extra dimensions. Some brain world models with large extra dimensions predicted that if those dimensions exist, the energy required to create micro black holes could be within the Large Hadron Collider's range, or LHC. If such a black hole were created, it would decay almost instantly via Hawking radiation, but its properties could be detected statistically. Searching for these signatures have so far found nothing, thereby placing constraints on the size and number of any extra dimensions. No doorway opened up in Geneva's accelerators, which is a good thing, considering public fears before LHC turn on. Imagine doomsday scenarios of runaway black holes. The outcome is consistent with either no large extra dimensions or black hole production thresholds higher than LHC can reach. This is a case where a dimensional portal, wormhole, or black hole was physically hypothesized and actively sought in data. The lack of evidence has somewhat constrained the more fantastical models. Then there's quantum tunneling in hyperspace. Quantum tunneling is a well-known phenomenon where particles cross energy barriers that would be insurmountable classically. In a sense, one can whimsically describe tunneling as a particle taking a shortcut through an unseen dimension of phase space. Some theoretical work has drawn analogies between tunneling and extra-dimensional travel. While not an experiment per se aimed at portals, tunneling experiments like Josephson junctions and superconductors or alpha decay in nuclei show particles do probabilistically disappear in one location and reappear in another without traversing the intervening space in the classical sense. This has been fully explained by quantum mechanics without recourse to alternate dimensions. It's just the wave nature of particles, but it contributes to the imagery of quantum particles doing impossible things that could be likened to portal-like behavior. Then there's the delayed choice eraser. This ingenious experiment, first generated in the 1990s, is worth mentioning because it mixes quantum measurement and a kind of retrocausality that is often misinterpreted as information coming from the future or from another realm. In the delayed choice quantum eraser, entangled photon pairs are used such that one photon goes to a detector that may or may not reveal which path information, and the other photon produces an interference pattern accordingly. The choice to erase or mark the which path information can be made after the first photon hits the screen. Yet the interference pattern, when conditioned on the second photon's detection, retroactively appears or disappears. This seems to suggest a sort of coordination outside of normal time, a mystery to be explained by the correlation of entangled particles and the fact that until you look at the combined data, there's no paradox. Some interpret this experiment as hinting that information or reality isn't fixed until a conscious observer brings the full picture together. If one were extremely speculative, one could imagine the delayed choice eraser as a time portal at the quantum information level, where an action in the present influences the outcome of something in the past. However, no usable signal can be sent this way, again, preserving causality in terms of information. What it does show is how entanglement can produce outcomes that look conspiratorial, as if nature knows when you will decide. For our purposes, it underscores that quantum phenomena challenges our linear, classical concept of reality and suggests the underlying reality might be a holistic one where space-time ordering is secondary to quantum correlations. Those inclined to link consciousness might say perhaps consciousness operates in a holistic domain too, and that's why we see these mind-bending results. Then there are the psychical portal experiments. On the very fringe, there have been attempts by various groups to literally open portals via consciousness or exotic technologies. For example, some researchers in the 1970s in places like the Stanford Research Institute played with ideas of using psychic abilities to teleport small objects with dubious outcomes. Others have claimed that intense consciousness or group meditation can produce anomalies in space, stories of yogis manifesting objects or appearing in two places, etc., which remain anecdotal. So we're talking bilocation here. These aren't scientific experiments by conventional standards, but they form part of the lore that motivates interest in consciousness and portals. A more concrete example, the Ganzfeld experiments in ESP research placed a receiver in a homogeneous sensory field, Ganzfeld, to induce an altered state, while a sender tries to send mental images. Some meta-analyses claimed above chance hits, suggesting a mind-to-matter information portal, perhaps. This is tangential, but touches on the idea of consciousness connecting across distances. A mental portal, if not a physical one. The results here, too, are contested and not robustly reproducible to the satisfaction of skeptical scientists. In sum, what does the experimental evidence tell us? Consciousness-based effects on quantum systems. Possibly there, but extremely subtle, if at all, and not reliably demonstrated to the wider scientific community. Dimensional portals or mirror worlds. The straightforward physics experiments have found no surprises, no particle vanishings or wormholes, but they have helped set boundaries on theories. Quantum correlations and retrocausal effects confirmed to exist, though explainable within quantum theory. They filled the philosophical fire about observer roles. What emerges is a picture of intriguing hints at the margins of knowledge, but nothing that definitively overturns our standard understanding. That said, the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence for these subtle phenomena. It simply means more rigorous research is required. Technological advances in quantum optics, for instance, now allow test of collapse models like objective reduction by looking for tiny spontaneous emissions that would signal gravity-induced collapse. As of 2025, those tests, for example, with ultrasensitive interferometers, have not found such signals, putting pressure on Penrose's ORC-OR theory. Likewise, neuroscience has advanced in probing neural correlates of consciousness without needing quantum magic so far. Classical brain mechanisms seem sufficient for the functions examined. On the other hand, quantum technology itself is burgeoning. Quantum computers, quantum cryptography, etc. And interestingly, humans interacting with quantum devices is becoming routine. There's even research on whether human operators can intuitively improve the performance of quantum experiments. Some studies had people adjusting parameters in quantum optics experiments via intuition with anecdotal success. While not mind over matter in the supernatural sense, it raises the point that as quantum tech becomes practical, we'll have more opportunities to see if there are any expected human quantum interfacing effects. Bringing together the above strands, we find ourselves at a fertile intersection of science and speculation. It's important to disentangle what we know from what we can imagine. From the side of established science, quantum mechanics unquestionably links observation with outcome. But in formal terms, observation means interaction with a measurement device. There's no consensus that consciousness enters the equations. Dimensional theories, wormholes, multiverse are well-grounded mathematically, but so far have no empirical support in terms of traversable portals or cross-universe influence. And decades of mainstream consciousness research in neuroscience strongly indicate that consciousness is an emergent process of brain activity, obeying known physics, albeit how exactly subjective experience arises, the hard problem, is still unsolved. But most scientists don't think quantum interdeterminacy is the answer to that. From the side of speculative extensions, the allure of a more magical or holistic reality persists. If consciousness could indeed collapse wave functions, it would imply a deep participatory universe, perhaps lending credence to philosophies like idealism, the notion that consciousness is fundamental. If minds could affect randomness, we might harness collective intention to influence systems, a primitive form of reality engineering. For instance, one could envision using trained meditators to reduce noise in quantum computing qubits, an experiment that could be done. If extra dimensions exist and could be accessed, it opens staggering possibilities: teleportation, time travel, communication with parallel selves. These remain in the realm of fiction for now, but they galvanize scientific curiosity. It's worth noting that some cutting-edge research in physics is blurring lines once again. For instance, the study of the universe as a quantum hologram blurs matter, information, and space-time. Some researchers, like physicist John Archibald Wheeler, later in life, even mused about it from bit, meaning physical reality, it arises from information, bit, with observers extracting that information in Wheeler's delayed choice. One gets the sense that how we ask questions of nature, how we set up experiments, determines what reality we get. Reality is not fixed, but a response to our queries. This resonates with ancient philosophical ideas and modern interpretations that consciousness and reality are intertwined. Another discussion point is the role of military and intelligence interest in these domains. The Cold War Psi programs, US Stargate and reportedly similar Soviet programs, highlight that even without scientific consensus, the potential of consciousness-related phenomena was taken seriously due to possible strategic advantage. This had both positive and negative effects. It generated some data and lent a bit of legitimacy to exploring these questions. But it also associated the field with secrecy, lack of peer review, and occasional sensationalism. Similarly, today, one finds tech entrepreneurs and defense agencies showing quiet interest in quantum consciousness or brain-machine interfacing at quantum levels, motivated by things like enhanced computation or even communication. If hypothetically a consciousness could influence a quantum system, one could imagine a future sensor or device that leverages that for communication. For example, a mind-operated random bit selector that could serve as a new kind of brain-computer interface. While still science fiction, the mere fact that consciousness can be discussed in the same sentence as quantum information theory is progress from when these fields were completely separate. Then there's interdisciplinary convergence. We see small but growing dialogues between physicists, neuroscientists, and philosophers. Conferences on consciousness sometimes include quantum physicists speculating on consciousness. So, for instance, at the annual Science of Consciousness conference. At the same time, some quantum physicists have published on the possibility of quantum processes in biology that could affect brain function. This convergence is essential if consciousness-based reality engineering is ever to move from speculation to science. It will require new language and rigorous experimental designs that satisfy both physicists and psychologists. One promising direction is quantum brain biology, investigating whether quantum coherence plays any functional role in neural processes beyond trivial scales. If, for example, quantum entanglement were found in neural enzyme dynamics or in sensory processing, it would validate a bridge that could allow more interesting interactions between mind and matter. So far, no clear evidence of this, but research like probing avian navigation, birds might use quantum coherence in their magnetoreception, suggests nature can, in principle, utilize quantum effects in warm systems. Then there are philosophical implications. If any of the consciousness effects are real, even minor, it challenges the strict materialist worldview. It would hint at a universe where mind has a role, a notion reminiscent of panpsychism, the idea that consciousness is a feature of all matter, or idealism, reality is fundamentally mental. This is why these topics often stir strong opinions. They tap into age-old questions. Do we create reality by observing it? Is there a cosmic consciousness or collective unconsciousness that we participate in? The data from quantum physics already gave us wave-particle duality and entanglement, which Einstein dubbed spooky action at a distance. Added consciousness to the mix, and one gets spooky action at a distance of the mind, a concept at home in Eastern mysticism. For instance, the notion of a universal mind, or the Buddhist idea that observer and observed co-arise. Even if not in Western science historically, it is intriguing that as science drills down into the fabric of reality, some interpretations of findings become reminiscent of mystical descriptions. This does not mean science is confirming mysticism, but it suggests a possible rapprochement or at least dialogue between them. Then there's risks of misinterpretation. A cautionary note in this discussion is that quantum mechanics has been misappropriated in popular culture to justify all sorts of pseudoscientific claims, often termed quantum mysticism. Books and films like What the Bleep Do We Know enthusiastically claim that you can influence reality because of quantum physics. While they draw on genuine science, they often overstate or misunderstand it, conflating possibility with actuality. For example, yes, at quantum scale, observation affects reality, but that doesn't automatically mean you can will a new car into existence by quantum mind power. Our exploration attempts to stay grounded by referencing empirical studies and credible theories. Yet we tread in an area where the line between rigorous hypothesis and hopeful speculation is thin. It's important that any evidence for consciousness effects be subjected to the highest standards of scrutiny, and that theoretical links between consciousness and physics be formulated mathematically if possible. Until then, claims of reality engineering must be taken with a grain of salt. Then there are future experiments. To advance what sort of experiments could be done, One idea is to integrate modern quantum technology with consciousness research. For instance, using entangled photon pairs to test if human interaction on one photon has any effect on its distant entangled partner's behavior. Quantum theory says no, but this would directly address some claims of mind's non-local influence. Another idea, employ high-precision atomic clocks or superconducting qubits as targets for mental influence attempts, since they can measure extremely tiny perturbations. If meditators could slightly alter a qubit's phase coherence time beyond what noise can explain, that would be revolutionary. Additionally, neuroscience could look for correlations between brain states and ambient quantum fluctuations. Is it possible that when a group meditates, the noise in nearby quantum devices shows subtle structure? Such cross-disciplinary experiments are challenging but not impossible with current technology. They would either find nothing, further closing the door on these notions, or find anomalies that force new science. Theoretical advances are also necessary. If someone claims mind can affect matter, what is the mechanism? Some have proposed extensions to quantum mechanics like observer-dependent collapse models or inclusion of consciousness as a term in the equations. Most of these proposals have not gained traction because they often cannot be distinguished from standard quantum mechanics and tests, or they raise more questions. For instance, how do you define consciousness in physical terms? Yet the effort to formalize these ideas is valuable. It may be that a future theory of quantum gravity or a theory of everything will naturally incorporate observers in a new way. Indeed, certain interpretations of quantum gravity's holographic principles hint that space-time and information are deeply linked. Perhaps observers are emergent properties of that linkage. Some theorists have even speculated that our universe could be akin to a quantum computer, which is the computational universe idea. In that case, consciousness might correspond to certain quantum information processes, and reality engineering might equate to hacking the code of reality, so to speak. All this remains at the level of metaphor right now. The journey through quantum mirrors and dimensional portals with an eye on consciousness-based reality engineering has taken us across solid ground, speculative terrain, and into deeply philosophical territory. We have seen that in mainstream science, quantum mechanics provides genuine mysteries like wave function collapse, entanglement, which invite one to wonder about the role of the observer. Consciousness, undeniably central to our existence, remains scientifically enigmatic in its own right, and some have been bold enough to connect that enigma with quantum mystery. The idea of alternate dimensions and portals, while born in theoretical physics and mathematics, captures the imagination as a possible frontier where our understanding of reality could expand. To synthesize our findings, there's no definitive evidence that consciousness can open literal portals or override quantum outcomes at will. No robust proof of mind-powered reality engineering has emerged. However, there are suggestive experimental results that keep the question open. Tiny anomalies in random systems and interference experiments hint, but do not prove that mind and matter could have subtle links. These results warrant continued investigation using ever more stringent methods. At the same time, there is strong evidence that many purported effects can be explained by known physics or fall within statistical chance. The challenge in this domain is disentangling true signal from noise and wishful thinking. Historically, science has often advanced by investigating anomalies at the fringes. Sometimes they lead nowhere, but other times they can open up new fields. It is conceivable that 50 years from now, a currently inexplicable consciousness-related effect will be an accepted scientific fact, perhaps as part of a new paradigm that unifies mind and matter. Alternatively, it could be that these early tantalizing results will dissolve under better controls, reinforcing a view of the mind as an emergent but causally impotent byproduct of classical brain activity. On the topic of dimensional portals, physics continues to push boundaries, from attempting quantum teleportation, which transfers quantum states, not matter, but is often described in terms of information portals, to probing high energies for signs of new dimensions. The ER equals EPR idea even suggests that our universe's geometry and quantum information are two sides of one coin. Is such a scenario? Perhaps our consciousness, which processes information, is far more integrated into the fabric of reality than we realize. It's a breathtaking possibility that motivates crossing disciplinary lines. In concluding, we emphasize the importance of maintaining scientific rigor and healthy skepticism, especially where extraordinary claims are made. Yet we also encourage open-minded exploration. The intersection of quantum physics, consciousness, and higher dimensional theories is a frontier where questions outnumber answers. Addressing these questions requires collaboration between physicists, psychologists, neuroscientists, and philosophers. It also requires us to develop new tools, both experimental apparatus and conceptual frameworks, to probe the subtle realm where mind and matter might meet. The phrase consciousness based reality engineering remains more a provocative slogan than a laboratory capability. But as this review has shown, its components are being assembled. Quantum optics gives us mirrors where reality splits into superpositions. Theories of wormholes give us equations for tunnels through space and perhaps time. And consciousness research gives us methods to systematically study subjective influence and experience. The engineering part, actively using these to shape reality, may be a distant prospect, or it may manifest in unexpected ways. For example, through quantum technologies that interface with human intention. The speculation that once belonged to metaphysics is gradually entering the empirical domain. In summary, quantum mirrors and dimensional portals as a topic straddles the known and the unknown. We have reflected on experiments that place human minds in the quantum loop and theories that extend our reality into unseen dimensions. The evidence so far upholds much of the conventional worldview, but leaves cracks through which some novel might shine, or some novel idea might shine, or something novel might shine. Whether that novelty will be a new physical principle involving consciousness, or simply a deeper appreciation of quantum reality that alters our philosophical perspective, remains to be seen. The pursuit itself, however, is valuable. It forces us to ask what we mean by observer reality and existence. In grappling with these questions, science enriches its own foundations and perhaps moves a step closer to a more complete understanding of the tapestry of reality, one that might eventually weave together the threads of the material and the mental, the quantum and the cosmic. All right, folks, that's it, and that's all. Good Lord. That's a lot. All right, let's go through some of the comments. Okay, Scott Ian is writing, consciousness precedes matter, no C, no M. Yeah, seems about right. Hey, Onside, good to see you. Says howdy, Sean, in chat. It's a door. Jalay Jalal's writing, one of the last prognostications made by Baba Vanga was that mankind would know how to break out of the paradigm, mainstream or mainframe simulacrum matrix. She said mankind would vote on stay or go. She had some opinion about the overall consensus for and against. She said that mankind would go and find out what was beyond the reality we all share. Well, that's good news. And the Bandanarana says, I've been reading The Holographic Universe and A New Science of Heaven. It all converges with plasma physics. Good. Okay. Everything exists at the same time, past, present, and future. Again, check out the Robert Temple's book, A New Science of Heaven. He talks about exactly what you're discussing. Interesting. Academia doesn't want to thoroughly investigate this topic. And then Jalay Jalal saying, the Gnostics do. They say Barbello Providence was the first emanation, the sacred witness, who both witnessed and recorded the entire event, thus the permanent Akashic record, predestination. Who knows? Yeah, clapping. I don't know where you're clapping, but all right, hold on. I got give me a second. All right, sorry about that. All right. All right, we got 40 minutes and I've exhausted all my material, but I do need to take a break. What are folks thinking about? What are we talking about? Oh man, that's really annoying. Somebody keeps changing my avatar in the system, and I really don't like it. Okay, back to where I was. Everybody, you're all quiet tonight. Oh, Jalay Jalal saying, I watch you over on Future Forecasters and the project you have taken on over there. How am I doing? Because I usually just crank that out. In fact, I still have to crank out the analysis part of the current target, which is very, very interesting this week. How am I doing? Be honest. If I suck, just let me know if I suck. That's fine. And then if I suck, recommend what I should change. Right? So, or what am I doing well? What do I need to improve? Sustain, and improves. Oh, you're too nice, Jalal Jalal. Great, really good. All right, well, I appreciate that. Yeah, I enjoy the work there. It's good. It's a good little distraction. Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah, the feedback I've gotten from the powers that be there. So Jalal Jalal is like, no, you are a rock star as a moderator. I appreciate that. Scott Ian says the interviews have been really interesting lately. The interviews on this show, Scott, or the interviews on future forecasting? What I've been told by the powers that be there is that compared to the other, I think there's two other teams. There's the superstar team, right, of like established remote viewers. Okay, this show. All right, thanks. Yeah, thanks, Scott. I have some other good ones coming. So I just recorded another one with Nathaniel Gillis yesterday, and then I recorded one with Rich Geldrich today. And by the way, Rich Geldrich is going to be on Coast to Coast AM this Monday morning. So like late Sunday evening. I think like 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, or sorry, Eastern EDT, and like midnight Pacific Time. Yeah, excuse me. I'm just talking a lot. So, anyway, the feedback that I've gotten is like of those teams where I think everyone but one person has a military background on my team. And then the one person that doesn't have a military background is a civilian that works for the Air Force right now. So apparently we're the like no nonsense, like, get to the point, like military precision team. So that's good. I think that's good feedback. No. So Scott Ian saying, speaking of portals, have you ever tried to get Anthony Bosgio on the show? No, I don't even know who he is. Tell me more. Tell me more about him. Oh, Basagio. Okay. Yeah, I still don't know who he is, but tell me more and see if like it's worth trying to check him out. Um. Oof. Okay. Yeah, you may have. I don't know. Oh man, it's like para. God, why am I? If you go to like the latest video, which airs on Monday, there'll be a link to his to that new site. I don't remember off the top of my head. It's like para something, but the videos like it's already up. It just hasn't aired yet, so it's in the description now, so you can find it now. Oh yeah, I can beat up on him. I can just give him a call and bother him. I've seen. I think Tom Campbell's awesome, but I find his philosophy extremely depressing because it's all about the simulation, and it sounds too digital. It's like too much of a digital sort of. I mean, not entirely digital, but the simulation hypothesis is probably the most likely to be true, but it just depresses me. Andrew Basaggio. Maybe I can just look him up. Um, let's see. I'm just asking the AI what it is or who he is. Oh, Basaggio? Who's him? Jalay Jalal writes, tell him to ask Chris Bledsoe about the University of Medical Imaging Research. Who's him? Claims to have been in government but as a child. Oh. Oh, so you're saying the Montauk. Yeah. Oh, Nathaniel Gillis. Yeah, but I don't think he doesn't talk to the Bledsoes at all, as far as I know. Um, let's see. Oh, that's weird. Okay, so Besad Basiago is a lawyer, author, and self-described chrononaut, time traveler, who has made extraordinary claims of participating in secret government programs. Okay, so his full name is Andrew Andy Daniel Basiago. He was born September 18th, 1961. He has been a candidate for president of the United States in 2016, independent, but did not win. No shit. He claims to have presided over the Mars Anomaly Research Society, Mars, and is a member of the Washington State Bar Association. His claims are quite extraordinary. Some of the main ones, he says he was part of a U.S. government project called Project Pegasus in the 1960s and 70s, which allegedly involved teleportation, time travel, and child operatives. He claims to have visited historical events, for example, as a child being transported back in time to places like the Battle of Gettysburg, and to have traveled to the future and possibly to Mars as part of these programs. He also asserts that part of his mission is to push for disclosure of these technologies and government programs. How his claims are viewed. His claims are widely considered to be fringe, speculative, and lacking in verifiable evidence. For instance, the Rational Wiki article on him categorizes him under conspiracy theorists. Others treat his story as part of a broader truth movement, UFO time travel disclosure community. While he does have mainstream or media appearances, podcast documentaries promoting his narrative, mainstream scientific and historical establishment sources do not accept his time travel or Mars visits claims as credible. Let's see. Sounds interesting, but yeah, it seems kind of fantastical. I don't know. I'm skeptical. I'm skeptical of these kind of weird claims. Um, Gray Owl, good to see you, my friend. Gray Owl, you're late. You're late. There's no watch here, but there is a watch. You just can't. It's invisible. You're late. You're late. All right. Oops. Yeah, Gray Owl knows. He. All right. His claims are wild. Very interesting stories. Yeah, I mean, it could be entertaining. Could definitely be entertaining. Oh, there was a Y Files episode on Basiago, or Basiago. Oh God, Solar System Secret Force. Yeah, that sounds like It sounds like Skywatcher. It sounds exactly like that, which seems like a huge op to me. I could be wrong, but there's a reason I haven't even reached out to like the Skywatcher folks because I think it's just an op. Oh, Gray Owl says I'm early. I woke up half an hour before I went to bed. You're all late. Don't let it happen again. Okay, so the entire Al Bielek story is over the top. 18 hours worth old school VHS taped. Yeah, that stuff sounds pretty fringy. So, oh my goodness. Yeah, I finished the prepared remarks super early this time. Trying to think what other random stuff's going on. Okay, so the Y Files episode is called Project Pegasus: CIA's Children Time Soldiers. Fred is saying. Who knows? Could be. Could be. Oh, brother. What else? Again, I know I keep talking about this, but nobody's buying. So I'll just say really quick. I have 2 short story collections coming out on Halloween, which is in 6 days. So you'll be able to find them on Amazon. You can buy the ebooks now, and then you'll be able to buy the either soft, hard paperback or hardback on Halloween. I don't know why Amazon doesn't let me pre-sell them. It's actually really annoying, but they're going to be available on Halloween. I want to try to do a more formal announcement, but I have like a pile of work, particularly like this show and other things to get through before I can get to that. So yeah, I'm just trying to get out as much creative content as I can because I want to make this a viable kind of job at some point in the future. But right now, it doesn't remotely provide enough compensation for me to like, I think I would have to be like at Danny Jones level, like million subscribers to even begin to think about making a living out of this. Okay, so Gray House writing, hope this is somewhat on topic. Probably not, but was taking in some keel in his description of reality regarding spooks and UFOs and such. Totally describes a simulation controlled reality. Well, there's definitely some element of controlled reality. That's for sure. Like, I think we don't live in a republic. We live in a simulated republic, right? Or simulated democracy, whatever you want to call it. Like they kind of already know who's going to win before they win, and then they just arrange it so it out. I mean, for instance, we had illegal aliens voting in our last election, right? And like the current administration proved it. Like they voted in this election, so the people who are complaining about ICE and whatnot, I really don't care. Like that's unacceptable. And in California, they would not they would not accept IDs, so anybody could basically vote. And it's just encouraged. So anyway, I'm not gonna get away from that. But we live in a simulated democracy because they can, do all this stuff to steer election results. Anyway, and then we had a previous guest, Chris Robinson, said that in the UK, as far back as at least the 70s, they could vote on somebody else's behalf. So when I go back to my retention graph, it's going to go like down to 30%, and then I'm going to see a spike at 98% as as my sentence gets filtered through the NSA keywords, because I've done that before on that exact topic, by the way. Okay. What else is going on? What do people want to talk about? Yeah, that's a gray owl, right? Yep, and yep, Sean. But even if we accept physics as is presented to us by academia, it's a dang matrix, a simulation, if nuanced to any degree. Yeah, it's some kind of a simulation. I don't think it's a digital simulation, right? Where there's like bits and the computer program and all that stuff. But I think it is, we inhabit these physical avatars and we're here to learn lessons. And at least that's what near death experiences imply. So, oh my lord. Huh. So Injured Cold 5700 said Rick Cutler. Look up that name when you get a chance. Let's look it up right now because I got time. Okay. Who is Rick Cutler? No, it ain't this guy. All right. Let's see. He's not showing up on ChatGPT, whoever he is. Oh, let's see. I'll try that. Let's see if it finds that. No. If he's out there, he's purged from ChatGPT, which is not surprising if he's associated with Israeli special ops. No. So Fred says missed a bit, but did the AI get into making portals with spinning mercury? No, definitely not. That sounds like what's that book by Nick Cook? That sounds like what they were doing in Germany during World War II, like Hans Kammler experiments and stuff like that. Oh, brother. Now you all are quiet tonight, and it's like the one night that I got through the material early, and I just got through like Cutler. They say the palm gun guy. Let me just do a Google search. Oh, yeah, he shows up in the second hit. Oh, this is like a Charlie Kirk thing. Huh. Yeah, who knows? I don't like as much as I want to believe the worst out of kind of Israeli operatives. I don't see any reason for them to why Charlie Kirk would be a target. He was like like effusively pro-Israel, and the even if he wasn't, there would be no upside for the Israelis to do anything there. So I don't think the Israelis had anything to do with it. But again, I haven't spent any time on it. I just don't think they had anything to do with it. It doesn't help their cause at all. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, let's talk Hatman. Any thoughts on the Dan Sherman interview? Uh, well, apparently it was taken down for a dubious copyright violation. I don't think there's any copyright violations. So that tells me whatever it is, they don't want you to see it. I personally don't think he was talking to ETs. I think he was part of an MK Ultra experiment or successor to MK Ultra because he had these pills, and I think it was something related to consciousness. Whatever. For all I know, he could have been channeling. Um, but I would take that angle. I think it was. I believe everything he says. I just don't believe that. I think it was a test of kind of manipulating perception or channeling or some metaphysical thing. But the pills are the kind of the tell. Okay, okay. So Gray Owl's like, I'm very much liking the work of Georgiani as of late. Looking forward to the upcoming tag dialogue with that cat. You can see it right now if you're either a captain or a first lieutenant, captain on the members only. I just released it there, and then lieutenant or above on Patreon. I just released it there tonight, so you can see it now, but you just have to. Uh, so Scott Ian is saying, I guess Charlie Kirk was allegedly questioning changing his mind on Israel towards the end. Confided in friends he was scared to talk about it. Yeah, that's fair, but I don't think the Israelis would kill him for that. Yeah, they said it was a copyright violation. Interesting. Hey, Private Soul, good to see you. Oh, wait. Injured cold 5700. The video I just had is now gone. Which video? One about Rick Cutler or the one about or the Dan Sherman one? The story sounded like a three body problem plot. Yeah, a little bit. J- Jalay Jalal, I don't want to know how you know that. She just says, fun fact, grapefruit juice and Viagra do not mix. I don't want to know how you know that, but it sounds like it was born of experience. Okay, so Fred is saying that Jesse Michaels keeps saying it was required reading for U.S. intelligence. I guess like above, beyond black, or above black, whatever it's called. Oops. Oh, okay. A video of Rick. Yeah. Gray Owl says, I would like to know how you know that, Jalay Jalal. I think everybody wants to know now what happens when you mix Viagra with grapefruit juice. I'm not sure I want to know that, but oh, because it causes low blood pressure. The lady's discussing how to off. Ooh, yikes! That's dark. That's super dark. I'm not gonna. Yeah, I'm not gonna repeat the second part of that because we will lose this transmission. That is dark. Very dark stuff. We can't talk about that stuff. Like anything related to pharmaceuticals in any way. We just gotta. It's just off limits. Anyway, yeah, that one's off limits. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Well, men, now you know, and knowing is half the battle. GI Joe. Anyway, I can't believe people are out there actually discussing something that dark. Okay. Oh God. My wife. Yeah. 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 Unaliving is what the term is. By now, it's probably the algorithm has probably figured that out. I'm just trying to get this. There we go. It's a little bit better. All right. What else are we talking about? We got 11 minutes, people. Well, you know what? Hit like, subscribe. Please subscribe. My God. It takes like, you have a really great month, and then like, I had this big wave, and then it went, and it's going back down. So please, we just got to try to get to 20,000. I mean, it's been painful, painful trying to grow this bloody thing. Yeah, just imagine the fun when certain thoughts become illegal. Gray Owl says, "Yeah, that'll be kind of annoying. I mean, that'll be out of control, like the Minority Report, basically. Like Philip K. Dick saw a future like that, pre-crime and such and such. So going back to somebody put up like, does anybody have any Hatman experiences they want to discuss at all? We can move on if there's nothing, but Y'all are quiet tonight. Like really quiet. I just have a whole other bucket of work I have to do after. Oh, Jalea Jalal says Hatman reminds me of Dark City 100%. Yeah, who knows? Maybe that is what inspired Dark City, for all we know. Oops. Again, like and subscribe. Only 16 subscribers, new subscribers today. Not a great day. Not too sweet. We need to grow faster than that for me to hit that target. I know it doesn't really matter, probably to folks. Yeah. I mean, 16 is better than yesterday. Yesterday was a disaster. It was 13. The day before that was a more sustainable 32. And the day before that was where we need to be, around 42 a day. But I've had much better days than that where, it's over 100. So it is painful trying to grow this stuff. Absolutely painful. Oh, my Lord. Sorry, there's a bunch of news. Okay, Gray Owl saying wait. Oh, there's a really creepy take on Hatman that I recall from a movie. I know what you're talking about, where a giant cockroach could make his shadow look like a man's shadow, a man with a fedora that would lure people into its clutches. It's called Mimic. I know exactly what movie you're talking about. It was with Mira Sorvino, but yeah, it was like a giant, like flesh-eating bug that would, yeah, Mimic. Yeah, in the subway tunnels of New York City. Yeah, it was a decent movie. Oh boy, I'm not repeating that. Okay, so Fred is saying, Sean, what do you think of the guys who claim they saw Matrix code with ayahuasca and lasers? I have no idea. Uh, who knows? I don't know if I need showgirls. I don't think my wife would appreciate that. But Jalal Jalal believes I need showgirls. So Captain, are we ready to invade Western Europe yet? It doesn't sound like it. No, no. Three years ago, the U.S. could have cut through Russia like a knife through hot butter. Now it wouldn't be so easy. The Russians have had plenty of time to get become very good at drone warfare, and we're not. Huh. Private Soul is saying apparently the double slit observations do not have the same effect when being observed by other primates. That's interesting. I don't know if I saw your comment before that. Yeah, we're smoking hot alien space babes. Yeah. Yeah, we're definitely in a control system. I just don't know exactly what it entails. All right, so Scott Ian, do you think I would be more likely to win the lottery by remote viewing the numbers in advance or by buying a random pick and projecting the numbers into the ether? I don't think it matters. I think you can affect things using like retrocausally. I think it's possible, but I don't think it's probable. But I think it's possible. Oh boy, green alien space babes or blue? I like blue. Blue's my vote. I'll look behind me everywhere. That gives me an idea, actually. Yeah, no. Let's see. Let's see what A. That's. Well, I'm not going to say what I'm doing unless it's successful, and then we'll figure that out. Let's see. All right, the team at Farsight, Courtney Browns, work constantly on games of chance lottery, and I have not heard if they succeed. Gray Owl writes the Neo Matrix answer to green or blue is both. Then you start seeing the Gray Owl Matrix in code. What you need is a couple of Zoomer kids to make AI trailers for your episodes. Maybe. What the heck? Oh, for fuck's sake. So Jalal, I asked Sora to create a video of hot blue alien space babe showgirls. And I got this content can't be shown for now. We're still developing how we evaluate which content conflicts with our policies. Think we got it wrong? Let us know. Big Brother is worried about the crazy ideas that you might have, and well, our policies, our community guidelines. Dude, it's just I'm tired of this net. Like it's just becoming more and more of a nanny state. Okay. Anyway, sorry, I had to do that. I mean, I hate when you get responses like that. It's like, are you kidding me? Big Brother everywhere. Yeah, I did that one. So Gray Owl writes, there's a good episode of an old podcast with Daz where they address the lottery paradigm and remote viewing, sort of control what won't let you win the lottery, just like how. Yeah, I did that. I did that interview. If you go to Daz, it's like the one of the first 3 interviews I did with him. Yeah, Lynn Buchanan did. No, he got all the right numbers, every single one, for the wrong lottery. He bought the ticket in the wrong jurisdiction. It He either had the right numbers for the Maryland lottery or the Washington D.C. lottery, but he bought a ticket for the other one. So he got it right. He just got it right for the wrong place. Anyway, all right. It's time for me to go and go back to the wheel of pain and continue working and producing content for you all. So like and subscribe. Keep coming back. Make sure you're still subscribed. And thank you, everyone. Have a great remaining weekend. God bless and Godspeed.